Okay, so for tonight we are continuing with our Bereshit series, and I want to go back to something that actually precedes the discussion of last week about the tree of knowledge, and I want to go to just the story of creation and how it seems from the Sefer Bereshit that the world was created in 6 days, and basically that based on a simple timeline that you can make from the lifespans of Adam and Sheis, Enosh, etc., until we know the 10 generations from Adam until Noach, from Noach to Abraham, and from Abraham until we came to Egypt, etc. So we can make a calendar, and we actually know what year we are in right now from the creation of the world, based on the documentation of the length of the lives of the different characters in the Chumash and the Tanakh, and so that's how we get that right now we are 5785, and that is like this date, this number 5,785. So it's based on the Chumash. So if you want to take the simple reading of the Chumash, so when you ask somebody, so how old is the world? When was the Big Bang? So when was that? By the way, I want to put on the table that Big Bang is in no way a contradiction to anything it says in the Torah. Big Bang just says a certain audio tone, that it doesn't say who did it, doesn't say how it did it, it just says that there was a bang. So it says in the Torah that Hashem said, let there be light, and there was light. It doesn't talk about the sound effects, and so if you want to say that it sounded like a bang, so be it. Like I don't know if it was a bang, if it was an or it was a shriek, or like whatever it was. But it's like it doesn't bother me if it was a bang. Like I'm not against bangs. So the that didn't sound good. But the Big Bang is actually equivalent to saying Bereshit. In fact, people don't even realize how off it is to think that it's a contradiction, because in fact, until the Big Bang theory, so the prevalent theory in science was that the world always existed, and that certainly goes against the Chumash. And so the concept of creation is really the equivalent to the concept of the Big Bang theory. The Big Bang theory is saying that there was a beginning, which means that there was a creation. That's mamish perfect. In fact, it's actually quite symbolic that the Big Bang theory came out in 1948, and I was told that when this theory came out, so the headlines in the newspaper that described it was the Bible was right. That's how they described the Big Bang. Because actually that was the question. There always this the what's it called, the conservation of mass means that something can't come from nothing, and the opposite of conservation of mass would be that there's just a Big Bang. And I also like to note that it doesn't always work, but sometimes if you Google what was before the Big Bang, so it says sometimes it says something about a constant singularity, which I think it sounds very beautiful, because that sounds like Hashem, no? Constant singularity. So the whatever I'm not sure what they think it means, but so the Big Bang and Bereshit is one and the same. But the question is that when was this Yehi Or? When was this Bereshit Bara Elokim? When was the Bereshit? And so according to science, it was between 7 and 8, almost 13.8 billion years ago, and that seems to fly in the face of what the Torah says, that it's 5785. Okay, it's a very, very big difference. So to be totally honest, this question doesn't really bother me so much. I'm not so into this question. It's a question like, how old is that? Is it old actually? I don't lose sleep over this question, and the reason why I'm doing this class is not because it interests me. It's just because I'm a people pleaser and I just want to get views. No, I'm just kidding. That the reason why I think that this is an important class is not because of the answer to the question, not because I think it's an important question, but because I think that this question is a litmus test for different approaches to which a person could react to having such a contradiction. Meaning that if on the one hand I have Torah telling me one thing, on the other hand I have science telling me something else, so what's my reaction? And that I think is a critical thing. That I think is a very fundamental thing that the Jew needs to know. That how do I deal with Torah? How do I look at Torah as a source of truth, and how do I look at science as a source of truth? And that, in my opinion, is far more important than the actual question of how old is the world. I don't really care how old the world is. It doesn't affect my life how old the world is. It's just but it is just a way of analyzing this more general question of how do I look at Torah versus science as the thing that I'm allowing to form my perspective on life. Okay, so.
Well, they use it to disprove the Torah. That's the whole thing.
Okay, I mean, I don't think if it would be that simple, then it would be an important question. Then that's another way of saying but that's only if you assume a certain approach. We'll soon see. So basically, I will tell you that there are three approaches that a person could have, and I think we'll start the class with this. That there's three possible approaches the person could have faced with this dilemma, faced with these two opposite pieces of knowledge. The first is that well, I guess you could have four different approaches. One is that science is truth. Science, I know. Science, you can prove science. Okay? Torah, it's up to interpretation. Okay? So whatever is science, so I'll take as truth, and whatever is Torah, so then I'll say that's I guess we misunderstood. Okay? This is an approach. It seems to be the approach of the Rambam. It seems to be the approach of the Rambam. The Rambam writes in Moreh Nevuchim a very, very interesting thing, that he's talking about the question that he brought up previously of was the world created or did the world always exist, which was a big matter of dispute in his time. That Aristotle was of the opinion that the world always existed, and the Neoplatonian view was that the world was created, and that was a dispute within philosophy, and so the Rambam was well aware of the fact that in the Torah it seems to say that the world was created, but he was very, very into Aristotle. Aristotle was he looked at Aristotle as his Rebbe, and Aristotle was of the belief that the world always existed, so that really bothered him, and so he has over 10 chapters in Moreh Nevuchim discussing what's the truth. Was the world created? Or did the world always exist? And somewhere in the middle he writes that if it would be clear to him beyond the shadow of a doubt that, meaning the proofs, the scientific proofs, sciences was very, very different 1,000 years ago. So the kind of proofs that they talk about in his time are logical proofs. It's very, very strange. Similar things to if you ever read the second chapter of Cabalism, it's called Shar HaBechina, where he proves the existence of God, and the kind of proofs that he uses are very they're not what we're used to. It's like logical proofs, which anyway. So the kind of proofs, the metaphysical kind of logical arguments that he presents. So he said, if it would be clear to me beyond a shadow of a doubt that the world always existed, so then I would have no problem explaining the psukim of Bereshit to be a metaphor. Okay, so that's an example of a person that takes science as truth, or whatever, there's logical things as truth, and Torah as something which is up to interpretation. And And this is a dangerous approach because it's basically saying that like the Torah always has to like the Torah is nothing and Torah is not a source of truth, and like as an aside, I've seen people take this Rambam to places that the Rambam never even meant to say it, like to look at the Sefer Bereshit, to look at the Sipur Bereshit as a metaphor is something that sort of makes sense, but people take this further to say that, you know what, maybe like Yetzias Mitzrayim is also just a metaphor, and like you can mamish like not believe in anything, and the Rambam certainly never said that. The Rambam says very clearly that he believes that Yetzias Mitzrayim absolutely historically happened. But anyway, it's a very strange approach to have, and you have people that basically don't look at Torah as a source of truth, and this seems to fly in the face of meaning that a person is going to take this approach in general and say that the Rambam said this as a general approach, that we should say science is truth and Torah is not truth. That is not a Jewish approach. Okay, meaning that the Rambam never meant that as a general approach, and even though they would say it's based on the Rambam, yeah.
If you're going to say, I forgot my question, sorry.
Okay.
I hear it now.
Get back to it. So this is a very not Jewish approach, because it's basically saying that the Torah is not a source of truth. Okay, and so like we say that the Natan Lanu Torah Emet, the Torah, we say that the Torah is truth. We say that Moshe Emet v'Torah Emet. To say that the Torah is not a source of truth. We everything we know, all the wisdom of God, like the definition of Torah is wisdom. So to say that Torah shouldn't be teaching us truth is quite absurd. So certainly, like, I didn't even count that the first time because I don't think that's actually a valid approach. And even though people who would claim this approach would base it on the Rambam, they would blame the Rambam, but I don't think that the Rambam would really validate their approach. So then there's there's three more approaches. Okay, the first approach, let's say, start with what's diametrically opposed to that, and that is to say that Torah is truth, and anything else, and science, science. Who believes in science? What's science? Just a bunch of goyim making up something, and like their universities. Oh, those are the anti-Semites. Yeah, that's those professors. Yeah. So this is another approach that seems to make little of science. Like, yeah, I don't believe in science. They don't realize that if it wouldn't be for science, then we wouldn't have buildings, we wouldn't have medicine, we wouldn't have like the whole like. And there's the world as we know it is certainly based on science, and to say that I don't believe in science is a comical thing to say. And they prove their point by saying that look, science changes their mind every year. They keep on changing their mind about what they believe in. So that proves that they don't really know what they're talking about, right? So you shouldn't trust any proposition of science, because just hold that thought. In 2 years, they're going to change their mind. Okay, that's an approach that. This is a Hasidic approach. This is it's like in like modern world we would just call this a fundamentalist approach. Fundamentalist, like Ari. Like, do you believe in science?
Yeah, for sure.
No, come on.
Do you believe in machines?
So this is it's a fundamentalist approach that like who said, like my grandfather never heard of these atoms, like who told you, like, have you ever seen the atom? and so it's a certain way of thinking that I'm going to do what my grandfather did, and like don't tell me with this new science business, and like I don't it doesn't affect me. Like I actually believe that the Earth is flat, it says very clearly that in the Torah that the sun rises and the sun sets. Like, doesn't say that. No, actually, the Earth's spinning. And you can prove your religion of flat Earth theory based on Torah, and it's this is that's why I call this fundamentalist. To say that I understand, I don't think that science is a thing. So that is one approach. Now this is especially relevant. Like I'll tell you one of the answers to this question of how do we reconcile this conflict, the conflict between what it says in the Torah and what it says in science. One of the ways to reconcile it is to say, oh, you believe in that radioactive dating business? Do you realize how messed up that is, that to believe in that stuff? And they find flaws in the concept of dating. I understand it's not actually, like, for billions of years it's not carbon dating. It's a different element that they use for dating because carbon doesn't go that far. But basically one of the answers to the question is to say that radioactive dating is not so accurate. I mean, I shouldn't say it's not so accurate. It's not a fact. And this is something that Lubavitcher Rebbe said once, that it's based on certain assumptions, and that is that the radioactive half-lives haven't changed over the past 6,000 years. B, that the magnetic force of the Earth has not changed over the past 6,000 years. And number 3, that the atmosphere has not changed over the past 6,000 years. Then, without those 3 things, so then the whole concept of dating it doesn't start. And number 4, that a big event such as a flood could have messed with the radioactiveness of these elements, and because we believe that there was a big flood, so then that's why nothing that we're finding in these radioactive elements is actually proving the fact that the world is billions of years old. Okay, that's one approach, and so without getting into the details of whether or not that's a good answer, I just want to point out that it's coming from a certain philosophy, and that the only reason why you would say that is if you believe that Torah is truth and science is Okay, that's a long way of saying that science is right? Because you're trying to say, like, yeah, like they just think it, and so the truth is that it's not just the dating of radioactive things that they come to these conclusions that the world is so old, that there's like another lots of different ways of coming to the conclusion that the world is very old. This is based on the stars, based on the ocean, based on the trees, based on basically the way that the one professor said it, that to believe that the world is 6,000 years old, it's not enough to not believe in radioactive dating. You have to basically not believe in science at all. Okay, so, and that like I said before, that's something that not everybody's willing to swallow, because like science is true. Like science, like the buildings that science builds, that science uses to build, they don't fall down, and like the medicines, they work. It's not like, I think I've told you before that like people quote Rabbi Nachman as saying that not to believe in doctors. That like doctors are all evil. You should never go to doctors. All medicine, it's a whole bluff, and like there's people that actually die because they think that they're being devoted to Rabbi Nachman and they don't go to doctors. And I always like to point out that it's actually it's a misquote, that Rabbi Nachman never said that he doesn't believe in doctors as a fact. He said exactly why he doesn't believe in doctors, and that is that you go to one doctor and the doctor will say, oh, you need to do XYZ, and do not do ABC, ABC will kill you. And the daily doctor will say, oh, I know what you have. You need ABC, and don't do XYZ. XYZ will kill you. And so he realized from the fact that like everybody is saying completely contradictory things that they actually don't know what they're talking about. And the truth is that 350 years ago, he was actually right. That medicine 350 years ago was so archaic and so backwards that they actually had no clue. And he was the genius that saw through the bluff. And like everybody else was just like worshiping science and like because you're wearing a white coat, so then like I should trust you. And he was the genius that saw that no, actually you're saying nonsense. But he never said that actually a science-based medicine that he would trust. It's just not like he. In fact, you can infer from what he said that if it would have been logical reason to accept what the doctors say, then he would follow the doctors. Anyway, so it's not such an easy pill to swallow to say that yes, I'm a religious Jew, so I don't believe in science. So it's really it's a difficult thing to say that I'm not going to accept. I don't care that the blah 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 like I don't care. Like don't tell me like all of your proofs, all your little just like yeah you go out like you and like Rav Shach called the Chilonim the rabbit eaters, and they're I guess it was a phrase from somewhere that they're like yeah like I'm supposed to care what you think with your you believe in gay marriages. I'm supposed to care what you say about the age of the universe. No, that's a certain mindset. Why should I care what you think? Like because you're. So.
What would you say to someone who says that I went to different rabbanim and they said multiple different things, and each rabbi can source it? I think that it's a very dangerous road when you say because there's two differences of opinion, the truth doesn't. There's no constant truth. I think that a lot of people would say if you go to different Hasidises, whatever, you go to not only that within your own, you go to two rabbis that live 2 doors down from each other. They're going to say completely different things. If you would go with the logic of Rabbi Nachman, from my understanding, I'm not saying anything about him, I'm just saying if you go with that logic, then rabbanim don't know truth either because of difference in opinion.
I think there's a difference, and that is that the rabbanim would hopefully say that there is room for what my neighbor says, but I think that what I'm saying is more correct.
Right. So you're saying it's the doctor ego that was back in the day.
And also I want to I think I pointed out that Rabbi Nachman was correct. That he actually called out their bluff.
Right.
That they were actually saying nonsense. The medicine in his time was actually a joke.
But also today there's a lot of nonsense in medicine.
Okay. Some people call what you're saying a conspiracy theory.
I mean, it's proven, but like when you give a lot of examples.
Okay, a different time. Yeah. Okay. And he also has anybody wants homeopathic pills? David is your man. So I'm just kidding. So the
what is a homeopathic pill?
what? So this is the first approach. The first approach is to say that I like don't use science to me. I don't believe in that stuff. That's just a bunch of garbage from a bunch of stupid people. So, and that's one approach. That an opposite, a second approach is the approach of Rav Soloveitchik. Okay, so Rav Soloveitchik, one of the things that he loved to speak about the most, a word that he would use the most, is something called the dialectic. And the dialectic, it's become more popular today because of DBT, but the term, I believe, was coined by a philosopher by the name of Hegel, that he did his PhD on Hegel, so that's why it became part of his lexicon. And the dialectic is that two contradictory truths can coexist. Okay, you can have two things that they actually contradict each other, and even though they contradict each other, they're both actually true. And even though that doesn't make sense, but it's still true. Okay, that is the concept of a dialectic. And basically, it forces us to just like decompartmentalize our brains to only think at one thing at a time, and that sometimes we're dealing with this truth because it's actually true, and sometimes we're dealing with this truth because it's actually true. And like I've said in other classes that like I believe that there's a Kabbalistic source to this idea, and like because in the Rambam writes that in the discussion of if we have free will, then how does God know everything? So the Rambam basically says that in our world this is a contradiction, but God is higher than our world, and in God's mind, in God's consciousness, these two things can coexist because God has a greater wisdom than human capacity. So for a human being, so it actually doesn't make sense. It's actually a contradiction. It's a paradox, but for God, it's not. So meaning that the understanding that there's such a thing as a dialectic, in a certain sense, is the admission that there's a higher truth, an infinite truth that sees reality from a higher infinite perspective, which is cool. Okay? So anyway, so that's his thing. That's the thing about the dialectic. And so Rav Soloveitchik, so he called in this dialectic when it comes to the discussion of Torah Mada, of science versus Torah. And he said that he learned in university, like he was a person that studied science and he respected science, and he looked at science as a source of truth, and he's not going to just deny science, and so he said that science is a source of truth, and that doesn't contradict the fact that Torah is also a source of truth. And when he spoke about the Torah as being a source of truth, so he brought in the fact that Torah is a tradition. It's a Masorah that has been passed on from generation to generation, from Moshe Rabbeinu, from God. Okay, so then there's something very precious about this tradition that we have, and he felt like he would talk about the fact that he got tradition from his grandfather, from Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, and he really idolized Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, and whenever he would talk about Rav Chaim, it was you could tell that he was talking about a superhuman. And the fact that he was connected to Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, that he was connected to the grandson of the Vilna Gaon, and the Vilna Gaon was like almost God, and so that was that to him, that was enough of a reason that if the fact that somebody that he would just faint to be in his presence told him that, listen, I promise you this is really true. That was really enough. That was really enough. And the concept of tradition in Judaism is such that the tradition itself is a source of truth. The fact that we have such deep respect for the people that are giving over the tradition, and he did, makes it a source of truth. And it's going to make it a source of truth which is different but no less valuable than the source of truth of science. So when somebody that I really, really, really trust tells me something, and I trust that they're not going to tell me unless they really, really know, and I really, really trust them, so then that's going to be a real, real truth to me. And the fact that science is going to tell me otherwise, I'm going to trust that. I'm not going to say that I think that you're talking gibberish, but it's not going to take away from the fact that Torah is an absolute truth to me. So when you ask me, is it absolutely true? So during Rav Soloveitchik's life, so it wasn't it was more. It wasn't yet. It wasn't the Big Bang theory was not yet so much of a scientific thing. It was more of a theory. Now, after his time, so the Big Bang theory actually became scientific. It became proven that the world was actually created, and that was by some I forget who it was that they found that they discovered some echoes of the Big Bang in space-time. They found scientific evidence of the Big Bang itself, which was what? So by now there's no self-respecting physicist that doesn't believe that the world started, that there was some point of creation, there was some point that they won't call it creation, there was some beginning, but at his time, so it was more of a contradiction. It was more like that science believes that the world always existed, and Torah believes that the world is created. So for him, it was like, yeah, I'm a religious Jew, so I completely accept this as an absolute truth, even though it's coming from a different place. It's coming from a place of tradition. It's not coming from a place of scientific proof, and so that's a second approach. That's a second approach which I think is a critical approach to have. It's a critical approach to be aware of, that this is on the table, that we can have a deep respect for science, and it'll never put our emunah in danger, because our emunah doesn't claim to have to be aligned with science, and that we'll just like okay, that's interesting. Like I part of me is very impressed with science, but like a deeper part of me is connected to my grandfather and is connected to my tradition, and like that's actually a more defining factor of what I actually stand for. So and that doesn't mean that I'm laughing at all at science. Okay, and then you have a third approach, and that is that it is necessary to answer the question. It's necessary to find answers, and this is coming from a place that it's a sort of a Messianic idea of achdut, of unity in reality, that there needs to be a unity between the light of the Torah and the truth of what the world is coming from, of science. Meaning that I believe that science is also coming from Hashem, and Torah is also coming from Hashem. So how can Hashem be telling me two different things? So it is incumbent upon us to reconcile the two. Okay? And it's coming from a good place. It's coming from a sweet place. And it's certainly true that at the end of times, like Bayamahu Yeh Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad, that at the end of times there cannot be any like crack. There can't be any that like of this that well like we believe, but like there has to be a complete unity of all reality at the end of times, and so the desire to find answers is actually a nice belief. It's just that I think that because Mashiach is not here yet, so it's important. Like I think it's important to know that Rav Soloveitchik's response is still there, and that like we don't need to feel nervous about this. We don't need to, if like somebody said once, like in a completely different context, that if somebody would, if Harvard University would come up with a new study that the children that don't have milk and meat, that at a couple of times a week, that they have a 40% larger chance of getting cancer and when they get older. So this is like the top, like the top universities are coming out with this thing that if you really care about your children, then you need to give them milk and meat. So like, what are we gonna what are we gonna do? How are we gonna respond? Are we gonna start like reinterpreting Bas v'Chalav? So I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna smile. I say like, okay, that's very sweet. You can give your kids milk and meat. That's like that. It doesn't begin to excite me. It doesn't begin to cause me to question we've been doing ganz fine until now. Like I'm not gonna start changing my life because of some study in Harvard University that like my kids are gonna be absolutely fine. I promise you. These things like we don't need to be obsessed with science, and like we have our worldview, which is based on Torah, which is strong. It's not going to change anything. So we don't need to well, if I really believe in Torah, then I need to disprove your theory. I need to fight with you and everything. Like, no, it's okay. So like, you can go for it. Like, it doesn't affect me. I think it's a healthy approach to not need to answer up every question. And that's why I think that the second approach is actually very, very healthy. Okay? But like I said, that there's a third approach, and the third approach is that it's necessary to answer up these contradictions, and so the thing is that with all the approaches, so then there's problems. There's issues with all the different approaches, and so what are you going to do if you don't like any approach? So that's why. So you could say that, like, you could say, okay, I don't like any approach, so the Torah can't be right. And that's why I think it's necessary to always have the grounding of the second approach, of the dialectic, that we don't need to reconcile. It's okay. It's okay. Like, Mashiach is not here yet. Okay. So what are the different ways of reconciling this contradiction? Okay. So first of all, this is a very famous approach, the approach of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Yeah.
Can you just summarize very quickly, like, title approach that we saw so far? Like, round one was this was that.
So far I said we said different approaches. We have 4 approaches, like one treif and 3 kosher, that in how to deal with the contradictions in general. Like, the treif approach would be that science is truth, Torah is not truth, and the first approach is that that I don't care, I don't believe in science. The second approach is that there's a dialectic, that 2 contradictory things can coexist. And the third approach is that I find myself responsible to find answers to the questions.
And you said, like, you feel good with, like, the second one.
And I think it's necessary to have the second one, because what are you going to do if none of the answers sit well with you?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Can you point out any specific contradiction on the world? Because I think there's a contradiction of the timing of the world and the beginning theory.
Again?
We said that it wasn't
Who's we?
a distraction. That it wasn't.
Your personality.
No, we're talking about how old is the world? Is the world 5,785 years old, or is the world 13.8 billion years old?
And the conclusion was it could be both because of the calculations and the scientific calculations. No. I did mention that some people don't like radioactive dating, Right.
but then I said that that's not enough of an answer, because there's another 10 reasons why science believes that the world is so old. So there absolutely is a contradiction between science and the simple reading of the Torah. Okay, so now we're in the third realm, which is feeling the necessity to answer the question, and what are the answers that we can possibly give. Okay, so the first and most famous answer is the answer of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who said that Hashem can do anything. So Hashem created a world that looks old, and he proved this, so to speak, by saying that it says in the Gemara that when Adam HaRishon was created, so he was not created a baby, he was created a grown man. So if you would have dated Adam HaRishon at the moment that he was born, so you would come to the conclusion that he's 30 years old. But the absolute truth is that he was actually only a moment old. So just like the dating of man would have brought you a false conclusion because Hashem created Adam to be 30 years old, so perhaps Hashem created the entire universe 5,785 years ago to look like it's 13.8 billion years old. Okay, that's the answer to the question. That all of your science is right, but that's because Hashem made it look like it's so old. Okay, so now the question on this is that why would Hashem do that? It seems so misleading. Like, why is there any reason why Hashem would want us to think that the world is older than it actually is? It doesn't seem to have any. It doesn't have any relevance. It's only like you said before. Like, a person could use this as as a way to disprove the Torah, like I should put it as a test. It doesn't seem logical. Rav Kaplan notes on this, when he discusses this approach, he has a sort of a freaky addition to this, that by the same logic, so it could actually be that the world was actually created 5 minutes ago, because Hashem is totally capable of creating us with memories of our childhoods and all of our years, and just like what I did yesterday, even though yesterday actually didn't exist. Actually, the whole world only started 5 minutes ago. It's right. It's freaky, no? Actually, we would like to believe that actually just because you have the things you wrote and the things Hashem could have created you with all the things you wrote, all the things you did. No, you can't. It's insane. So we would like to believe that our perception of reality is actually real, and not just Hashem tricks us into thinking that the world is actually old. And
Concept that Hashem in actuality didn't create anything. Everything is Hashem, and Hashem is just putting himself in different
I'm not sure exactly what you mean. I think there is a concept that even though Hashem created the world, Hashem is still everything. But there's certainly a creation. It says Bereshis bara Elokim. You can't. No one can deny that on some level there was a creation. Okay, so that's the first approach. That's the first approach is that the world was created old, created with all of these wrinkles and all of the radioactive things that make it look like it's billions of years old, even though it's all a lie. Okay. Approach number 2 is, I told you that Rav Kaplan has a little pamphlet about this, and his approach is it's based on a midrash, that the midrash says that Hashem, before he created the world, so he was boneh olamot umachrivan. He would create worlds and destroy them. Okay, so basically his approach is that how many worlds did Hashem create before he created our world? So he brings sources that this is the 7th try. This is the 7th try. And so if this is the 7th try, and now how old was each world? So if each world was 7,000 years, and this is the 7th try, or 6,000 years, so then we get to 42,000 years that we're up to now, and then so that gets us up to 42,000. We're still quite a bit away, quite a bit from 13.7 billion. But then he brings in a curveball that it says that a day of Hashem is like 1,000 years to us. Yeah. So if you multiply how many days there are in 42,000 years, and multiply that by 365 times 1,000, so then he gets to the number that you get exactly, not exactly, it's like 15 billion, but it's pretty close.
Within the margin of error.
Yeah. Okay.
If the world was destroyed, then why did that exist?
So yeah, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. I'm not sure how he understood the destroying. I guess he would understand. He understood the fossils of prehistoric creatures were part of those pre-existing worlds that no longer exist, that were destroyed. So he I guess he would interpret that the destroying was just burning them, not completely non-existence, right? So now, first of all, it's important to put on the table that this midrash is certainly it's a Kabbalistic midrash, and standard Kabbalah understands this midrash to mean that something Kabbalistic, that all of these worlds that he was creating and destroying, so there was never an atom that was actually created. This is all in the precursors to an actual existence. So it doesn't make any sense that there's a physical reality from these previous worlds. Okay, so yeah. That's why this approach is based on a Kabbalistic midrash, which is not the way the Kabbalists understand it. Okay, that's the biggest problem. That's the biggest problem with that. Now there's a third approach, and that is there's a physicist that he teaches in Aish. His name is Dr. Schroeder. He teaches in the Aish Essentials program, and he gives over his belief system about this, and he gives it in lots of places. And basically, his approach is based on the theory of relativity, that the time passed differently back in the good old days than it does now. Meaning that we could say that based on how many days existed, so how many times there was Vayera Vayevoker, there was only 5,785 Vayera Vayevokers, but the way that time passed was different than it is now. Now, what do I mean? I'll tell you the way I understand this. I once heard a very fascinating idea that there's a Gemara that talks about animals that can live for a certain amount of time. That it says that, so the Gemara says that if you don't have a spine, you can't live more than 12 months. The Gemara makes such a statement, and the Gemara asks a question on that from the story. That the story said there's a story that there was a mosquito couple. There was a mosquito couple, and mosquito couple, Mr. and Mrs. Mosquito, and the Mr. Mosquito went to this really the city of really fat people with juicy blood, and he went and he had this amazing meal, and he came back and he told his wife, and she said, "You went and had this amazing meal and you didn't invite me?" And she was so offended that she didn't talk to him for 12 years. So the Gemara says that, so you see from the story that a mosquito could last for 12 years. The Gemara says, no. The Gemara means B'shani Didhu, with mosquito years. With mosquito years. It doesn't mean that with our years, it means mosquito years. Okay? So I once saw in this book that he wanted to interpret this Gemara that based on the theory of relativity, and to propose that maybe different creations actually experience time differently than the way we experience time. And so basically, like he explained it, that you ever wonder how is it that like flies can always like escape you? Like they have such little brains. Like how could they possibly always? I'm trying to kill them, and they have to like be so like complicated in order to like. How could it be they have such a little brain? Like I should just be able to kill them. And so he proposed that what would be if a fly experienced time differently than we do, such that when we're trying to kill him, so as far as if you would be the fly, you would experience it that he's going like
Slow motion.
So he has like plenty of time, even though he's a fly brain, but he has plenty of time to escape. So like the ones that we kill, like those are like really dumb ones. So that's he proposed. That's what it means. That mosquito years. Mosquito years means that actually the way that they experience life, we experience it as 1 year, but but in his experience, he was living a long life, and so that's the way Dr. Schroeder, the way he understands. He explains why this perhaps would be, that why the theory of relativity would make it the time passage would change based on the expansion of the universe, but basically that's his approach. That is actually literal of a literal 6 days and 5,785 years. However, that the way that we experience time would make that into much more time. Okay, that might or might not be, and the fourth approach, which I think is the simplest approach, is that when we say that the world is 5,785 years, so we don't really mean from the beginning of creation. Everyone agrees that we mean from the sixth day, which is from the beginning of the life of Adam, right? So it doesn't say how long the first 5 days were, or the beginning of the sixth day until Adam was created. So now what's the definition of a day? What we consider a day is that the amount of time that it takes for the Earth to spin on its axis, right? So that concept of the Earth spinning on its axis, that half the day we're facing the sun, half the day we're not facing the sun, that actually only makes sense after day 4, because only in day 4 was the solar system put into effect. There was only a sun and the moon and the Earth, and the Earth was always there, but from day 3, but from day 2 in a certain sense, but the concept of night and day as we know it, of having a solar system, that was only from day 4. So when it says days, that there was days 1, 2, and 3, that can't mean a day as we know it of 24 hours. There is no reason why it should mean 24 hours. So it obviously means an era. It's using the word yom as a metaphor for something. So once days 1, 2, and 3 obviously means eras. So what's so difficult to say that the Torah wants to be consistent? So days 4, 5, and 6 also means eras. Okay, this is a fourth way of answering the question, which I think is the most straightforward. But it's almost obvious, right? So there's two questions. There's two questions on this approach, which like I said is the approach that I think is the most glad. One is the question that Lubavitch Rebbe asked on this approach, that is that Lubavitch Rebbe felt that this was obviously not a true approach because Shabbos flies in the face of this approach. How does Shabbos fly in the face of this approach? Because it says that we keep Shabbos to remember that Hashem created the world in 6 days. So if the world actually was created in 13.7 billion years, 7 billion years, and then just after that was Shabbos, so then how is 7-day cycle in any way remembering that Hashem created the world in 6 days? Okay, that's his question. With infinite respect to the Lubavitch Rebbe, I don't really understand how that's a deal breaker, how that's like a game over kind of question, because the concept of keeping Shabbos is that we're remembering the fact that Hashem created the world. Like it doesn't have to be that we're actually reliving the 6 days of creation. We're remembering that Hashem created the world and then brought Shabbos into the world. And how often should we remember that? So Hashem, in His infinite wisdom, decided that we should remember this every 7th day, and the 6 days should be our recognition of the 6 eras. Like I don't see why the fact that Hashem created the mitzvah of Shabbos as a remembrance of the fact that He created the world, that it has to be exactly the same kind of days. Okay, so that's the first issue with this last approach. The second issue with this approach is a Gemara in Chagiga. The Gemara in Chagiga says that among the things which was created on the first day was midat yom v'midat laila, which on a simple level means that the time span of day and the time span of night, Hashem also created on the first day. How do you know that Hashem created the time span of day and the time span of night? Because it says, Vayerev v'vekar yom echad. So in that lies that there's a certain time span. So presumably the time span of the day and night is 24 hours. So it would seem that the Gemara is saying that Hashem created the concept of 24-hour days, like meaning the Gemara was aware of the fact that it didn't make sense to have day and night before you have a sun and a moon. And that's why the Gemara is saying that Hashem created the concept of having a 24-hour day even before that. So I don't really have an answer to this. I just imagine that midat yom and midat laila can also have esoteric explanations. That really what the Gemara means to say is that it says that basically on any level you have to understand what does it mean by erev v'yoker, that what is night and day. If there wasn't any sun and moon, so then what does it mean that there was night and there was day? And so it means something, and so presumably it means something, and that something also has a certain midah to it. So even though I don't have the answer to this question, but I presume that there is a metaphorical way of understanding this Gemara as well, and therefore it also shouldn't be a clincher to defeat this kind of approach. But anyway, these are the four approaches that I'm aware of. To summarize, that number one, that Hashem created in old-looking world. Number two, that there were previous existing worlds that Hashem was building and destroying. Number three, the theory of relativity, and number four, that the thing about that just means eras, it doesn't mean days, and it could be that the first day actually took billions of years, and that's actually no contradiction whatsoever. But none of these are foolproof, and so it's always good to have the Rav Soloveitchik's approach of the dichotomy of the dialectic, that we don't have to have an answer, and it's okay that like Torah is true without science, and it's always going to be okay. As an aside, I want to note that even after we solve the problem of 13.7 billion years, so then there's also another question that in this last approach of the eras, that is that okay, but even within man itself, there's a problem because Neanderthal man is dated to be 130,000 years old. So even man itself, you answered the questions of like the beginning of creation, but you didn't answer the question about man. So, but what's very interesting is that according to historians and archaeologists, so one of the things that was unique about Neanderthal man is that, as opposed to modern man, is that Neanderthal man didn't have speech. They didn't communicate with speech. And what's fascinating is that when it talks about the creation of man, so it says Vayi Adam Nefesh Chaya, and Targum says that Ruach Mamala, that what was unique about Adam Harishon was his ability of speech. So it's actually very beautiful that there were prior to Adam Harishon coming around in the world, there were many men, but they weren't modern men. Adam Harishon was the first of modern men, which has the ability to speak. Now, truth be told, according to science, so modern man itself is a little bit older than 5785. There's like approximately 10,000, maybe a little bit less. But that, I think, is also within the margin of error, that we don't have to say that Torah is lying because of a discrepancy of 4,000 years. And for that, we can say that like it's not the dating that they have is not so 1,000% foolproof, and we can adapt some of the other approaches as well. Anyway, but moral of the story is that the Torah is true, and that Baruch Hashem, that we don't need to We don't need to deny science in order to accept Torah, and we also don't need to deny Torah in order to accept science. So l'chaim to truth.